delighted to be at the Limits in Canada. I only wish I was with you in Toronto. It was looking forward to a fun trip. At the Limits has always been a great experience where we actually try to do just that, take things to the limits. My talk today, surprising findings from clinical trials in the fields we cover, is really a broad platform, and it's not a specific with this data point and that data point, but to give you an overarching view of the importance of clinical trials, not just clinical trials, but outcome trials. Obviously, I have some disclosures, but I think they won't influence any of what I'm about to say. Experience will influence it. Let's start with the biggest surprise, an early surprise, which impacted the cardiovascular community immediately. We were all trained to stamp out every arrhythmia. And if you're a cardiologist in the audience and you were practicing before this, and you were in training, you were called the consult to get rid of these funny beats because we knew from the epi that they were associated with bad outcomes. And we had drugs that could make the bad beats disappear. So a trial was done, funded by the government, the NIH. What happens when we make the bad beats go away? Let's show that we improve survival. So the outcome isn't arrhythmias. The outcome is who's alive, who's dead. And wow, what a surprise this was. You would rather be on placebo. Now, I say that lightly, but that was an amazing discovery. And think of all the people we tackled as they left the hospital to put them on these kinds of drugs. And think of all the lives saved by learning that we were wrong. A humbling experience. Now, cardiology has a lot of humbling experiences. Here is one that I would have guessed, do. Use an inotropic agent, make the failing heart a better pump. And the surrogates were all aligned. Yes, ejection fractions improved. Yes, cardiac output's better. Yes. Now let's give this long-term, not for the surrogate of ejection fraction or exercise performance, but for survival. And once again, you'd rather be in the placebo group. This wasn't done to show that. This was done to show the opposite. Wow. And it wasn't just only this inotrope. There were 3 that were tested. And each time, you'd rather be in the placebo group. Humbling. We're still in the 1990s. Okay. Sometimes surprises are the opposite. Rather than stimulate the heart, let's inhibit. Let's use a neurohormonal inhibitor. Let's use a beta blocker. Well, I had nothing to do with this. Surprise. Reduction in the risk of death. Now, the endpoint is deaths. A third reduction in your risk of death on top of the ACE inhibitors that had already proven a benefit. A pleasant surprise, but only because the outcome trial was done. So we can find many areas where the surrogate looked good, but the surrogate didn't predict outcomes. And I'll only talk about a few, but in each case, you could never know safety from the surrogate. So humbling experiences, humbling. We need the trials. Probably our best success story in cardiovascular medicine was the statins, and no one takes credit for this. It's a whole field, an amazing field. But what was so interesting, each trial after discovery marched to a new target population, one that hadn't been studied before. Beats placebo in high risk, beats placebo in people with normal cholesterol, beats placebo in high risk prevented. Down here, let's go against placebo, but let's take a population never studied before. On and on, so that within 15 years, we have 26 trials, 170,000 people. Put it all together, we could be sure we're helping, and we're not hurting. How else can you know that? But this field was so mature that we had trials all levels of risk. Even in this field, we can show where we didn't help people. Now I bring in my renal community. Sorry, two well-done trials in dialysis. Drug which helped people, effectively lowered cholesterol, didn't help in terms of events. Can even bring in heart failure, same story. Okay, surrogate, HDL. Let's raise HDL. Well, go for a walk, red wine. Maybe you can raise it by 2, 3. How about a 70% increase? And how about throw in a 25% lowering of LDL? Great surrogates. Well, study was done not for lipids, but for mortality, for outcomes, and more people died on the drug, on torcetrapib. Wow, humbling experience. The renal community, you're not isolated from this. From the very beginning, normal hematocrit study, people on dialysis, get the hematocrit is being treated in everyone. Let's bring it to normal, and people didn't benefit. Okay, how about non-dialysis? We did treat against placebo. We found no benefit. We found more strokes. Red HF in heart failure, anemia, treat, raised hematocrit, clearly effective at doing that. And when you looked at the two of them, both populations in the treat-like population, a twofold risk of stroke. Is that definitive? Hard to prove safety definitively, but wow, what a message. 2 studies. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The diabetes community, you're not isolated from this. You've been using drugs to treat the hemoglobin A1C, never associated with improved cardiovascular outcome. Never. So much so that when safety became an issue, we first started getting major cardiovascular trials to prove safety, not even to prove effectiveness. And the definition of safety didn't have heart failure. I showed 2 wows from the 2015, 2016. Now we have a whole string of wows. But let me just show you how that was taken over. The discovery by accident, that SGLT2 inhibitors reduced heart failure, improved cardiovascular outcomes. Taken over by the heart failure mafia, and suddenly we see that they improve heart failure events, and you don't even need diabetes. Can I say that again? You don't even need diabetes? Let me say that even louder. If you relate it to reduction in hemoglobin A1C, you don't see the effect. So we fell on this by accident. It was a discovery, and then the outcome trials. Now back to the renal community, and hooray for the renal community. Same accident, make people do outcome studies, and now we're seeing better renal effects. Surrogates, take it over, do major clinical trials, and the renal community is now showing large studies, major differences on hard outcomes. I'm just showing one, here's another, and that's because the 2 speakers before me were handling these topics and handling them very well. But my point is, and I'll end with that, we need the outcome trials. I don't care what got you to the point of being enthusiastic enough, but then you need to prove the risk and the benefit, and then we need to implement it in order to improve public health. So, surprises, yes, they can be happy surprises, they can be sad surprises, but the only way to find out is to do the studies. So thanks for your attention, and let's keep going at the limits. Pushing the limits is how we're going to improve public health and learn more. Thank you again.